I was 17 the summer my family rented the house in northern Vermont. Even now, years later, I still remember how badly I didn't want to go. Back then, I thought family vacations were punishment disguised as quality time. My parents had this annoying habit of forcing togetherness, and my little brother, Caleb, was always somehow my responsibility. He was 9, curious about everything, and followed me around like I was the most interesting person alive. At 17, that was the last thing I wanted. I had just started dating a girl named Brooke, and all I cared about was staying home, texting her, and pretending my life was more exciting than it actually was. Instead, my parents dragged me 5 hours north into the middle of nowhere to spend a week in a giant rental house surrounded by pine trees and absolutely zero cell service. At least that's what I thought. The place was called Briar Hollow. It sat at the end of a gravel road so narrow that tree branches scraped both sides of our SUV as we pulled in. The house itself looked ancient. It was 3 stories tall, painted a faded gray, with black shutters and a steep roof that made it look like something straight out of an old ghost story. Even I had to admit it looked impressive. My dad practically bounced out of the car. "Now this," he said, stretching his arms wide, "is a vacation house." Caleb grinned and raced toward the front porch. I grabbed my bag and followed slower, already irritated. The front door opened before we reached it. Standing there was the owner. His name was Leonard Mercer. He was probably in his late 60s, painfully thin and taller than anyone I'd ever met. His back hunched slightly, making him seem even stranger somehow. He wore faded overalls and a green fishing hat with dark sweat stains around the brim. But it was his smile that unsettled me. Not because it looked threatening, because it looked too deliberate, like he'd practiced it. "Well now," he said, his voice sharp and cheerful. "Welcome to Vermont." He shook my father's hand with surprising enthusiasm, then introduced himself to the rest of us. My mom was instantly charmed. Leonard talked fast and laughed loudly at his own jokes. He explained that he lived in a smaller, attached section of the house. "Used to be servants' quarters," he said casually, "long before my time." That got my attention. Attached? He led us inside and showed us around. The layout made no sense. Hallways branched into other hallways. Staircases ended at odd landings. Some rooms connected in ways that felt architecturally impossible. And then we reached the second floor. At the far end of the east hallway was a thick wooden door with an iron handle. Leonard topped it twice. "This," he said, "separates your side from mine." I frowned. "You mean there's literally just a door between us?" He chuckled. "Locks from both sides." That didn't help. The worst part? My bedroom was directly across from it. As soon as Leonard left, I turned to my parents. "You seriously rented a house where some random old dude lives on the other side of my wall?" My mom said, "He owns the property, relax." "It's weird." "It's convenient," Dad corrected. I rolled my eyes and carried my bag upstairs. That night was eventful. We unpacked, ate takeout, and settled in. I spent most of the evening texting Brooke from the one corner of my room where I could barely get service. By morning, my family had already planned a 6-mile hiking trip through some nearby trail system. Absolutely not. When I refused, my parents argued for maybe 5 minutes before giving up. "Stay here," Dad said, "and don't touch anything." The second they left, I FaceTimed Brooke. I gave her a sarcastic tour of the house, showing off its maze-like halls and creepy antique furniture. When I got to the second-floor hallway, I stopped outside the connecting door. "This," I said dramatically, "is where the old murder hermit lives." She laughed. "You're exaggerating." "Am not." "To prove it," she challenged, "open it." I reached for the handle, mostly to show off. I fully expected it to be locked. It wasn't. The latch clicked. The door creaked inward. I froze. Beyond it was a narrow sitting room, dimly lit, dusty, perfectly silent. Brooke's voice crackled through my phone. "Okay, that's creepy." Naturally, I stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of cedar and something metallic. There was an old couch, a lamp, and framed black and white photographs lining the walls. I swept my phone camera around. See? Nothing. Then, somewhere deeper in the house, a floorboard creaked. Not settling, not shifting. A footstep. I bolted. I ran back through the door and slammed it so hard the walls shook. My heart hammered. A moment later, someone knocked. 3 slow taps. I stared. Then Leonard's voice came through. "Are you all right in there?" I opened the door just enough to see him standing in the hallway, still smiling, but his eyes looked different, harder. I got an alert from my motion sensors, saw someone wandering around. I mumbled an apology and admitted I'd opened the door to prove to my girlfriend it wasn't locked. For a moment, he just stared at me. Then he laughed. "Well, curiosity keeps us young." He leaned closer. "But lock that door tonight." The way he said it made my stomach tighten. Why? His smile returned. Wildlife. Then he turned and walked away. I locked the door immediately. Then I shoved my desk chair under the handle for extra security. When my family got back that afternoon, I told them everything. My mom thought it was harmless. Dad said I had invaded the man's privacy. Caleb thought it was awesome and asked if Leonard had secret tunnels. No one took my concerns seriously. That evening, they decided to drive into town for dinner. Again, I refused to go. Mostly because Brooke said she'd finally be free to call. As sunset bled through the windows, the house changed. The cheerful vacation atmosphere disappeared. The halls darkened. Every creak sounded deliberate. I was sprawled on the living room couch texting Brooke when I heard it. A loud crash from upstairs. I shot upright. Another sound followed, something scraping. Then, silence. My throat went dry. Slowly, I climbed the stairs. The second-floor hallway was pitch black. I reached for the switch. The light snapped on. The chair I'd jammed under the connecting door was lying on its side, and sitting beside it was a black backpack, one I had never seen before. I stared, unable to move. Then, from inside my bedroom, I heard breathing. Slow, heavy, very close to the door. And then, the doorknob began to turn. For a second, I just stood there. My brain refused to process what I was seeing. The doorknob to my bedroom twisted slowly, carefully, like whoever was inside didn't want to make too much noise. The sound was subtle, a soft metallic click, then another. The person inside was testing the lock. My chest tightened so hard it felt impossible to breathe. Every horror movie I'd ever mocked suddenly came flooding back, and for the first time in my life, I understood exactly how people froze in those situations. Fear doesn't always make you run. Sometimes it locks every muscle in your body. The knob turned again, harder this time. The old brass latch rattled violently. That snapped me out of it. I turned and sprinted down the hallway. I didn't stop until I reached the glass-enclosed sunroom at the front of the house. It wasn't much of a hiding place, but it had 2 locked doors between me and the rest of the house. I slammed the inner door shut and twisted the deadbolt. Then I locked the outer screen door too. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone trying to call my parents. No signal, of course. I cursed under my breath and crouched beneath a wicker patio table, trying to stay as small and silent as possible. The house groaned around me. Floorboards creaked somewhere upstairs, then downstairs. Slow footsteps, measured, unhurried. Whoever was inside wasn't rushing. That somehow made it worse. If they'd been crashing through the house like some crazed intruder, at least panic would have given me clarity. But these footsteps were calm, patient, like whoever they belonged to knew exactly where I was. I covered my mouth to stop myself from breathing too loudly. The footsteps moved through the living room, stopped, then started again, closer this time. The doorknob to the sunroom rattled. Once, twice, then silence. I thought I was going to pass out. Seconds dragged into what felt like hours. Then headlights suddenly swept across the front yard. My parents. I nearly cried from relief. I exploded out from under the table and pounded on the glass. "Don't come in!" My dad slammed on the brakes. He threw open his door, staring at me like I'd lost my mind. I rushed outside barefoot, nearly slipping on the porch steps. "There's someone in the house!" Before my father could respond, movement caught my eye. Leonard emerged from the shadows near the tree line. He wasn't smiling. In fact, I'd never seen a human being look that serious. He walked straight to my father and leaned close, whispering something into his ear. Whatever he said drained every ounce of color from Dad's face. "Everyone back in the SUV," he ordered, "now." No one argued. My mom immediately grabbed Caleb and shoved him into the back seat. I climbed in beside him, still shaking uncontrollably. "What's happening?" Mom demanded. Dad started the engine. "We're leaving." "Leaving where?" "The grocery store parking lot in town." "Why?" He didn't answer. He just reversed so fast the tires spit gravel in every direction. As we tore down the narrow road, Caleb started crying. I'd never seen my father look scared before. That terrified me more than anything. We drove in total silence for almost 10 minutes before pulling into the brightly lit parking lot of a 24-hour grocery store. The fluorescent lights felt surreal after the darkness of Briar Hollow. Dad parked near the entrance but left the engine running. "Tell us what's going on," my mother said. He gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Leonard saw someone in the house." "What?" "He has motion cameras throughout his side of the property. When he got an alert earlier tonight, he checked his feed and noticed movement near the connecting hallway." Dad swallowed hard. He thought it was Ethan messing around again. I felt a surge of guilt. Because of what happened that morning, Leonard had assumed I'd opened the door myself. But then, Dad continued, he checked the hallway camera on our side. Mom's face paled. "Is there a camera in our hallway?" He said it's disclosed in the rental agreement for security monitoring. That explained why none of us had noticed. The tiny black dome mounted near the ceiling. I remember seeing it and assuming it was an old smoke detector. Dad took a shaky breath. He reviewed the footage. "And?" Mom whispered. Dad looked at me. "When you turned on the hallway light, someone walked out of your bedroom." The words hit like ice water. I couldn't speak. "He was tall," Dad said. "Completely bald, wearing dark clothes and carrying that backpack." Caleb whimpered. "He crossed the hallway, picked up the bag, then went back into Ethan's room." Every hair on my body stood straight up. The breathing, the turning doorknob. He'd been inside my bedroom the entire time, watching, waiting. "What did Leonard do?" Mom asked. "He grabbed his shotgun and went outside to keep watch." I blinked. "He has a shotgun?" "We're in rural Vermont," Dad snapped. "Apparently everyone has a shotgun." None of us spoke after that. Then 5 minutes later, Dad's phone rang. Leonard. Dad answered on speaker. His voice came through low and urgent. "The police are here. He ran when they entered through my side." "Did they catch him?" "No." A pause, then, "They chased him into the woods." My stomach dropped. Leonard continued, "Unpack your things now. Stay where you are." The call ended. An hour later, Leonard arrived in his rusted pickup with all our luggage piled in the bed. Police lights flashed behind him. He approached our SUV and handed my father the keys. They lost him near the creek. Nobody spoke. Finally, Leonard looked at me. "You did the right thing." I wanted to ask 100 questions. Who was he? How did he get in? Why my room? But I couldn't force the words out. We spent the night in a roadside motel. None of us slept. The next morning, we drove home. Vacation over. For months afterwards, I had nightmares about that doorknob turning, about standing frozen in that hallway while someone breathed just inches away. 6 months later, my dad called Leonard for an update. The police never found the man. They searched the surrounding woods for days. Nothing. No footprints, no discarded belongings, nothing. Even stranger, they never determined how he entered the house. No broken windows, no forced doors, no signs of tampering. It was as if he simply appeared inside my room. I'm 26 now, old enough to understand how reckless and arrogant I was back then. For years, I told myself the man was probably some drifter looking for shelter, that he never meant to hurt me. It's easier to believe that. But there's one detail I've never been able to explain. When Leonard packed our belongings, he found my phone still sitting on the living room couch. Brooke had sent me one final text while I was hiding in the sunroom. A message she'd sent after watching our FaceTime abruptly disconnect. It read, "Ethan, who was that bald man standing behind you?" Every summer, my family rented the same house on the Gulf Coast. It sat on the far edge of a sleepy beach town in southern Alabama, tucked behind a quiet strip of white sand and surrounded by sea oats and weathered fences. The place belonged to my aunt and uncle, who spent most of the year living there, but every July they opened it up for the entire family. And when I say entire family, I mean everyone. Parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, enough people to turn every meal into controlled chaos. For most people, that probably sounds exhausting. For me, it was the highlight of every year, especially because of my cousins, Ryan and Claire. Ryan was my uncle's son. He was 22, lived locally, and knew every hidden bar, every beach bonfire, every sketchy after-hour spot in town. If there was something fun happening within 20 miles, Ryan knew about it. Claire was my age, 21. Technically my cousin, though people constantly mistook us for siblings. Same dark hair, same sharp features, same sarcastic attitude. We'd grown up inseparable. The three of us were trouble together. Not dangerous trouble, just the kind of reckless stupidity that comes with being young, overconfident, and on vacation. This happened 3 summers ago. The first few days were perfect. Lazy mornings on the beach, seafood dinners with the family, late nights hopping between bars while pretending we were way more sophisticated than we actually were. Ryan, predictably, treated every night like a personal mission to outdrink the entire county. Usually, Claire and I knew exactly when he'd hit his limit. His laugh got louder, his balance got worse, and he started insisting he was totally fine every 30 seconds. That Friday night, he reached that point faster than usual. We'd gone to a crowded beachfront bar called Driftwood, and by midnight, Ryan had managed to annoy both a bartender and a bouncer. Not exactly his finest work. After loudly arguing that he should get free drinks because he was basically local royalty, he was physically escorted outside. Claire and I followed, both trying not to laugh. Ryan stumbled backwards onto the sidewalk, arms spread dramatically. "This establishment," he slurred, "has no respect for its patrons." Claire rolled her eyes. "You got thrown out for trying to climb onto the DJ booth." "I was enhancing the vibe." "You were ruining the vibe." I stepped away to call us a rideshare. By then, I'd only had 2 drinks. I always played the responsible one. Mostly because if I didn't, nobody would. While I was arranging a pickup, my boyfriend Mason called. I answered and stepped a few feet away to hear him over the music pouring from nearby bars. He laughed when I told him what had happened. Ryan got kicked out again? Shocking, right? We talked for maybe 2 minutes. When I turned back, Claire was sprinting toward me. Her face had gone pale. "Ryan's gone." I frowned. "What do you mean, gone?" "He just got up and walked off." I ended the call immediately. We searched the sidewalk first, then the parking lot, then the alley behind Driftwood. Nothing. I called his phone. Straight to voicemail. "Of course," Claire muttered. Ryan had a talent for letting his phone die at exactly the worst possible times. We split up briefly, checking nearby streets while shouting his name. That's when Claire yelled from across the road. "I see him!" I ran over. About 50 yards ahead, Ryan staggered toward a narrow opening between 2 abandoned buildings. Beyond it stretched a dense patch of cypress trees and marshland. Locals called it Cypress Hollow. During the day, it looked harmless enough. At night, it looked like the entrance to hell. Black water, twisted roots, dense underbrush. The kind of place every horror movie warns you not to enter. Ryan was already halfway in. "Ryan!" Claire shouted. He turned just long enough to grin stupidly. Then he disappeared into the darkness. "Unbelievable," I muttered. Without thinking, we chased after him. The second we crossed into Cypress Hollow, everything changed. The sounds of town vanished. No music, no traffic, no laughter from crowded bars. Just the thick, oppressive hum of insects and the soft squelch of mud beneath our shoes. My sandals sank almost immediately. "Fantastic," I whispered. Claire used her phone's flashlight to guide us. Branches clawed at our arms as we pushed deeper through the brush. The air smelled rotten, wet earth and stagnant water. We found Ryan about 2 minutes later. He was crouched near a fallen tree, completely still. For one brief moment, I thought he might be sick. Then he raised a finger to his lips. Shh. Claire stared. Did you seriously drag us into swamp murder territory for a joke? Ryan didn't answer. His face had changed. The drunken grin was gone. He looked sober, terrified even. Then I heard it. A scream. It ripped through the trees so suddenly I nearly fell backwards. High-pitched, raw, the kind of scream that doesn't sound human at first because it's too full of panic. Then another followed. And another. Closer. Different voices. At least 2, maybe 3. The sound echoed through Cypress Hollow, bouncing between trees until it was impossible to tell where it was coming from. I froze, every muscle locked. Beside me, Claire grabbed my wrist hard enough to hurt. Ryan slowly crouched lower. None of us spoke. The screaming continued. It wasn't shouting, it wasn't drunken yelling. It was pure fear. The kind that reaches inside you and squeezes. Then, just as suddenly as it started, silence. Complete silence. No insects, no rustling leaves, nothing. It was like the entire swamp had stopped breathing. We stayed frozen for what felt like forever. Probably 15 minutes, maybe longer. I kept expecting more screams, footsteps, something, anything. But there was only stillness. Finally, Ryan whispered, "We need to leave." No one argued. We stumbled back through the darkness as fast as we could. By the time we reached the road, my legs were shaking. Our rideshare had long since canceled, so we walked. None of us said much during the mile back to the house. Inside, we scrubbed mud off our feet and sat around the kitchen island trying to explain what we'd heard. Ryan insisted it could have been animals. Claire immediately shot that down. I'd grown up around enough wildlife to know the difference. Those had been people. Eventually, Claire made a suggestion. "We go back tomorrow." I stared at her. Absolutely not. In daylight? Still no. What if someone was hurt? Ryan looked uneasy but nodded. She's right. I wanted to refuse. Everything in me screamed to stay away, but curiosity is powerful and guilt is worse. If someone had been in danger, how could we ignore it? So the next morning, just after sunrise, the 3 of us drove back to Cypress Hollow. Standing at the edge of those trees in daylight should have made me feel better. It didn't. The swamp looked less supernatural, but somehow more real. And that made it scarier. Claire switched on her phone's GPS. I can retrace our route. She wasn't exaggerating. Claire had an almost freakish sense of direction. Within 20 minutes, she led us to the exact fallen tree where we'd hidden. Our footprints were still stamped in the drying mud. Ryan pointed deeper into the swamp. That's where it came from. We all agreed. Same direction, same general distance. So, against every instinct screaming at me to stop, we kept walking. And after maybe 5 minutes, suddenly Claire froze. Oh my God. Her voice was barely above a whisper. She pointed toward a low-hanging branch. Something blue was caught on it. A torn denim sleeve, weathered, mud-stained, and dangling just above the ground like someone had ripped free while running. For a moment, none of us moved. The torn denim sleeve swayed gently in the humid morning breeze, creaking against the branch like it had been hanging there for years. But it hadn't. The fabric was too fresh, too clean in places. There were dark smears across the cuff that looked like dried mud, though something about the color made my stomach turn. Ryan stepped closer. "Maybe it got snagged," he said, though even he didn't sound convinced. Claire crouched beneath it, examining the ground. There are footprints. I looked down. She was right. The muddy earth below the branch was torn up with overlapping shoe prints, some deep, some partial, all crossing over each other in chaotic directions. It looked exactly like what happens when multiple people struggle in one place. A knot tightened in my chest. "Nope," I said immediately. "We're done. We're leaving." Claire ignored me. She followed the prints deeper into the trees. "Claire!" She didn't stop. Ryan hesitated, then followed her. I muttered a curse and trailed behind. The swamp seemed quieter than before. Not peaceful, just watchful. Every step felt wrong, like we were intruding somewhere we absolutely did not belong. The brush thickened as we pushed forward. Branches scraped against my arms. Mud sucked at my shoes. Then the trees opened into a small clearing, and my stomach dropped. Lying in the center was the rest of the denim jacket, completely shredded. The sleeve we'd found was only part of it. The main body of the jacket lay twisted in the mud, torn nearly down the middle as if someone had ripped it apart with incredible force. Scattered around it were more footprints, at least 5 or 6 distinct sets. Some boot prints, some sneakers, all overlapping, all concentrated in a tight circle. A struggle. There was no other explanation. Ryan slowly turned in place, scanning the clearing. This isn't right. No kidding. Claire pointed toward the far side of the clearing. Leading away from the wreckage was a single line of footprints. Just one set, deeply pressed into the mud. They disappeared into a wall of dense undergrowth. I wanted to leave. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run. But Claire, stubborn as always, took a step toward them. "Absolutely not," I snapped. "What if someone needs help? If someone needed help, they needed it last night." Ryan finally backed me up. She's right. Claire looked frustrated, but didn't argue. Instead, she took a few photos with her phone. Then we got out of there. Fast. Back at the beach house, we locked ourselves in Ryan's room and debated what to do. Call the police, ignore it, convince ourselves it was nothing? Ryan was the first to speak. "If we call, what exactly do we tell them?" "The truth," I said. "That we were drunk, chased me into a swamp at midnight, heard screams, then went back this morning and found ripped clothing?" He had a point. Claire crossed her arms. "So what? That's suspicious." "Suspicious isn't evidence." I hated that he was making sense. The longer we argued, the more uncertain I became. Maybe the jacket had been dumped there. Maybe the screams came from kids messing around. Maybe we were connecting unrelated things because fear makes patterns where none exist. Eventually, Ryan wore us down. "If this is nothing, we waste police resources. And if it's something," Claire shot back. He didn't answer. Neither did I. And that silence made our decision for us. We let it go, at least outwardly. But none of us were the same for the rest of that trip. The nights felt heavier. The beach, usually comforting, felt exposed. I kept scanning crowds for faces I didn't recognize, listening for screams that never came. When vacation ended, we all returned home and slipped back into normal life. At first, but Cypress Hollow followed me. I'd wake in the middle of the night hearing phantom echoes of those screams, high-pitched, panicked, desperate. Sometimes I'd convince myself they sounded female, other times male, sometimes several people. Memory is unreliable like that. It shifts to fit fear. Months passed, then nearly a year, and just when I'd almost managed to file the whole thing away as an unsettling mystery, Claire called me. Her voice was shaking. "Turn on Channel 8. I did. The local Alabama news was running a segment about human remains discovered near Gulf shores during a construction project. The remains had been found less than 2 miles from Cypress Hollow. The reporter explained that preliminary estimates suggested they'd been there for years. The victim was believed to be a male in his early 20s. No ID, no cause of death released, no confirmed foul play. I felt cold all over. "That could be unrelated," I said. Claire was quiet. Then, they mentioned clothing. I turned the volume up. The anchor continued. Fragments of denim had been recovered with the remains. My blood ran ice cold. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then she whispered, "You think?" I don't know. And I don't. I still don't. We never told anyone about what we saw. Not the police, not our families, no one. Partly because too much time had passed, partly because we were afraid of sounding insane, and partly because admitting it would mean accepting what we might have witnessed. Ryan refuses to talk about it now. He insists the timing was a coincidence, that the denim could have belonged to anyone, that the screams were probably drunk tourists. Claire isn't so sure. Neither am I. What haunts me most isn't the torn jacket or the footprints, or even the possibility that we stumbled onto the aftermath of something terrible. It's one specific detail. When we found that clearing, the mud was soft from rainfall the night before, fresh. Every footprint should have been sharp, clearly defined, but one of them wasn't. Near the center of the struggle was a single impression unlike the others. It was enormous, far larger than a normal human foot. Long, narrow, almost unnaturally so. At the time, I assumed erosion had distorted it, that fear had exaggerated what I saw. But months later, Claire sent me one of the photos she had taken. She had zoomed in, circled it, and beneath the image she had typed, "Tell me this looks human." I stared at that photo for nearly an hour, because no matter how many times I looked at it, it didn't. And sometimes, late at night, I still hear those screams in my dreams, always ending the same way, with sudden silence, and the feeling that whatever made them was standing just beyond the trees, listening.